Welcome to another episode of the Wealthy Podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Nyrose. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you were there, or blanked on a name that you've said 100 times, but just all of a sudden can't retrieve it? Well, you're not alone. And many of us, when that happens, wonder, is this normal or is it something more? So today on the Wealthy Podcast, we're talking about that thing that sits quietly in the back of many of our minds. In Canada, more than 772,000 people are living with dementia, and most of those cases are Alzheimer's disease. But there's a shift. For the first time in decades, there is real momentum in understanding, detecting, and even slowing this disease. Today on the Wealthy Podcast, I am sitting with the most delightful human being ever, Dr. Pieter Strauss. He's a psychiatrist, and he's here to talk about Alzheimer's disease and the amazing clinical research that is taking place right here in the Central Okanagan. You're going to want to listen up. The topic of today's episode, I can guarantee, is something all of us who are over the age of 40 have thought about. In Canada, more than 772,000 people are currently living with dementia, and that number is expected to nearly double within the next 20 years. And most of those cases, about 60 to 70%, are due to Alzheimer's disease, a condition that for a long time has felt inevitable, untreatable, and deeply frightening. But that's changing. For the first time in decades, there is momentum, not just in understanding the disease, but in potentially slowing it, detecting it earlier, and giving patients and families something they haven't historically had enough of, options. And what makes this episode meaningful for us is that this work isn't just happening in major centers like Toronto or Vancouver, it's happening right here in our own community. Through programs at Kelowna General Hospital and through global research networks like Headlands.
Headbands.
Headbands.
Catchy one.
I know. Okay, I'll start again. Through programs at Kelowna General Hospital and through global research networks like Headlands Research, patients in the Okanagan have access to leading-edge clinical trials and emerging therapies. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Pieter Strauss, a physician and clinical researcher who is part of that work. He's not just observing where Alzheimer's research is going, he's actively involved in the trials that are shaping what comes next. That means patients here at home may have access to therapies that are still being studied, still being refined, and in some cases, offering real potential to slow the progression of this disease. So today, we're going to talk about what Alzheimer's actually is. We'll talk about what the science is telling us, and we'll talk about what it means to have clinical trials right here in our own community. Welcome, Dr. Strauss. Peter, may I call you Peter?
Please do, Shauna.
Peter and I have been having the most lovely conversation before we even started recording. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Let me echo, it's such a privilege to have me here today. I learned fast that there's this impressive KGH Foundation, the work that you guys do. I am a closet teacher, I always joke. The thing I love best is to teach. So here you give me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful to have met you, and I'm glad you're here. You've had some incredible experiences throughout your career that have brought you to today. And so I kind of want to roll back, rewind the tape a little bit. And I can hear that you have an accent. Tell me about young Peter and what inspired you to get into psychiatry and then to eventually pursue more of a specialization in Alzheimer's.
So I'm really happy that there's a particularly large expat of my kind of people. So my accent, I think, is understandable and recognizable. I grew up in South Africa. I was the fourth of 6 boys. And by the time I rolled around, my elder brothers had already taken the market in excellence. My eldest brother was a natural leader. He was elected for the provincial youth choir. My second eldest brother was a provincial class athlete. My third brother was an experimenter. There was an open area across our yard at the time, and he had this project with chickens where he taught them to fly. So he would get up into a tree at a specific branch length and release the hen. And I would be very used to be reading on my bed and see the chicken flying past shoulder high. And then he would measure the distance and breed them. And I think he eventually got them to fly about 400 meters. So
chickens don't fly.
Chickens don't fly.
Who knew?
You
did?
Yeah, exactly. He had them riding on his shoulder. So they took the market on being cute and special. So I had to find something, and I learned that I had this aptitude to read the room, to start understanding fairly early on that there are dynamics at play. And so eventually I think I became the house's negotiator and maker of treatises and peace bonds. So that naturally got me into the diplomacy of it. And then we had a strong family tradition of being doctors. My one grandpa was a doctor. My dad grew up fairly poor, and he would have loved to have been a doctor. My eldest brother also was a family physician. So to go into medicine was a natural choice at that time. I've been that for 42 years now. And from the Alzheimer's perspective, I remember, in 1984, when I graduated, the only way you could diagnose Alzheimer's dementia was through autopsy, through post-mortem. And really late 90s, the first actual medication arrived, and they were symptomatic. So the difficulties that you had as a doctor trying to help people, the fear that people had as they started realizing that they may have that, really stuck with me. And then on a personal note, my mom, they stayed back in South Africa, and those days transatlantic calls were quite expensive. So my wife and I would phone once a week on a Sunday evening. And my brothers were starting to say to me, my mom might be dementing, but we never heard anything about that. It was just, no, mom's fine. And I'll never forget the day when on a certain day she led with the news of something exciting that had happened to her. About 5 minutes later, she says, "Did I tell you about something exciting that happened to you?" And in the end, she said, wait, I've got something very exciting to tell you. And I put the phone down, and my wife and I looked at each other, and I thought, the long goodbye has begun. So this has been the path that brought me here. I'm so excited that my encore career, which I plan to do for the next 20 years, is going to be here at OCT here in Kelowna.
Yeah, and it's great to have you here. You were sharing that you're still sort of straddling your clinical practice in Abbotsford, but then that you're so excited to be doing this clinical research here in the Okanagan, and I'm very happy to have you here. We've heard from a number of your colleagues in healthcare how important it is for patients to have access to clinical trials. And it's not something that we've actually really talked about here because we haven't had somebody like yourself on the podcast to talk about it. But if you live in a major urban center like Toronto or Vancouver, I just said Toronto. Wow, that is like, I have a son that is living in Toronto. We don't say the second T. But if you, I did that. But if you live, so if you live in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, these larger urban centers, and you have some of these complex diseases, you do have access to these clinical trials. And typically in smaller regional communities like the interior of BC, we don't have access to those. So just the fact that this is available here in the southern interior is hugely important for us to share. So I'm happy you're here to talk about that. So we're talking about Alzheimer's disease today specifically, and I know that this is an area of healthcare that is a bit mysterious, but it literally it lives rent-free, as I said in my intro, for all of us. I think all of us over the age of 40 start to wonder, like, is this Alzheimer's? Is this general aging? What's going on? So I want to know, like, when you first meet with patients and families that are facing this potentially, what are they most worried about?
Oh, Shauna, that is a crucial matter. I think it's one of the diseases that has the worst psychological profile. From the patient's point of view, it is a living loss. They often are in denial at the beginning because they don't want to look at what is starting to stare them in the mirror. And I think the profound loss that they have, that they worry about, is that gradual loss of identity. That you slowly lose who you are. You start losing your dignity. You start losing your capacity, your competence. Sooner or later, you can't drive any longer. You worry about the caregiver burden that you are on people, and you don't speak about that. So often you then don't accept help. And the people who are offering the help is seeing that you're being obstreperous, but you just don't want to burden them. And so you're also, as you then start isolating, fearful of that stigma and isolation. And in that process, you isolate even more. But then wait, the family and caregivers have, in my opinion, even a tougher burden, because sadly, as you progress down the road of this terrible disease, there is a time when you're not aware of it anymore. So it's a strange consolation,
Right.
that the victim eventually is okay.
Right.
But the family isn't, all through that ambiguous loss, because they have that same loss of identity. They fear and feel incapable of seeing the changed family dynamics that's happening. They have caregiver burnout, because what they have is they have a person who's asking the same question 10 times. They do these odd things that you don't understand why they're doing it. You have the burden of decision making. When do we pull the plug on the driver's license? And mom is going to be so upset if we tell the doctor to pull the plug. Mm-hmm. So they are the hidden victims of this disease. Mm-hmm. And I think specifically we'll speak about that again in terms of Kelowna. I think Kelowna, particularly more so than the urban centers, may carry even a stronger burden than those areas.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to get into that because it's very true. We talked about this before we started recording. We've talked to some of our neurologist friends here at KGH about neurodegenerative disorders. But you're a psychiatrist, and I love that because it provides some context and understanding and a lens in this space that really can help us understand Alzheimer's disease in a different and very important way. So how does being a psychiatrist shape the way that you understand and approach Alzheimer's?
I'm going to start teasing the neurologists, and they have to forgive me because they don't know me yet, but I'm never malicious.
They're lovely. It's okay.
Good.
They can take it.
The psychiatrists were the people who discovered this disease 125 years ago. So it's been in our backyard. We've just been very powerless, as they have been, to do something. And having joked at them, the neurologists are the soldiers of this field. They are the people that are doing massive amounts of work. But I think there's a very strong place for the psychiatry in that we are trained to look at the person holistically. And we are often at a place where when the subtle changes starts happening, we're there. They're already referred to us at that time. We're also able to differentiate between what is troubling memory loss in comparison to anxiety or depressive disorder or sleep issues that are primary sleep issues, that all can cause a picture that looks like that. And then I think we are able to really help the patients themselves with the fears that they have. And we all, because it's an emotional disease. I think emotionality or emotional support is not an addendum. It is intrinsic to the management of this. And then we have the family that are also patients in that way. I had an interesting case a few weeks ago. We have a very exciting study that is an oral medication, because most of the current ones are intravenous infusions and so on. That's harder to do. And we had a pre-trial screening of this patient, and he passed everything, including an MMSE. But then when he came for the actual screening, he scored 1 point too high.
What is the MMSE?
It's the mini mental status examination. It's a cognitive tool. The two that are used most is that and the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So those are the screening tools that the sponsors use to make sure that their protocol select exactly the person or group that is affected in a specific amount.
Right.
So that they don't take in people that are too mildly affected or too severely affected.
Okay.
So though he had an qualifiable score in the MMSE in the pre-trial, pre-trial screening, a few weeks later, he scored 1 point more. Likely as a learning effect, because he may have remembered some of the items that was asked. And so they were so excited to come onto this trial. And I said to my staff, we need to go and talk to him and the wife. And because I'm a psychiatrist, I could see the dynamics going on. The wife was devastated, trying to hide it. He became devastated, but had been a professional that could never show his emotions, and so tried to pull that back. She tried to reach out and help him. He almost tossed her away, said, don't touch me, I'm okay. But because of the luck that I have, that I love people the way I do, we could end that whole conversation where they were still hopeful, where they knew, okay, you're slightly high for this particular trial, but we've got others in the pipeline.
Yes.
And come back. And I could even do some teaching, Shauna, that it's okay for a guy to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you're a bad guy. Okay, if you have to cry alone, but it's okay, and your wife is just trying to help you, which I think, as a small example, is a emblematic interaction where psychiatry, I think, is ideally placed in this dreadful disease.
I totally agree. And that patient and his wife were lucky to have you. Seems like, we were talking again about how sometimes, that 1 point can be devastating. Mm-hmm. And also the opening for another part of the story that we may not know how that's going to go yet. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a good place for us to start with the question that so many people have. I am 51. I will be 52 this year. And I sometimes ask myself, is this happening to me? And I know I'm not alone in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because you start to forget things. You start to forget people's names that I've known forever. Last night, I was sitting with my daughter and her boyfriend, and we were talking about our first cars, and I was like, oh, my first car was this one. It was really crappy. But my second car was like the best. And it was such a great car. I loved it so much. And I remember I saved my money. I bought this car. Do you think I could remember the name of that car? Mm-hmm. I couldn't. And so there's just this, is it what is normal memory change? And what's the difference between normal memory changes and something more concerning?
It's a crucial question. I think it's a question that also hopefully is deconstruct anxiety. You are going to be 52, a very young-looking 52, if I may add.
Thank you.
And it's not flirting. I'm just factual. I'm going to be 65 in a week.
A very young-looking 65, and it's not flirting. It's just factual.
Thank you. That's reciprocal, and I deserve that. Sorry about the mic. And so I think I like to teach in stories. Imagine that at age 25, I have a 3-foot fence that I have in my way. I know that I might have taken a step or two approaching it, but I would just hop right over it.
Yeah.
Nobody would even think about this. At 65, I could try that, but the risk of a faceplant would be there. So I would perhaps have to put my hand on the top of the fence and swing myself over, climb over it. If I, at 65, have to be carried over the fence, I would be in trouble.
Okay.
But it's okay to have more trouble getting over the fence now at 65 than I did at 25. Because my body has aged.
Right.
My proprioception has gone backwards a bit. My flexibility, as I have not done the yoga I'm supposed to be doing, has gone down. But it's not pathology. So if we take that analogy and we put it into the memory area, it's normal to not remember the make of that car. But sometime or other, you're going to have it pop back in your head. So the fact is still accessible there. What happens in the memory loss of Alzheimer's is that they lose the registered item. The book isn't in the library anymore. We are, my library technician is a little bit slower than yours and a little bit slower than young people that we are jealous of their age, but we have the books in the library. This disorder takes bigger things away. They will not remember a conversation they had. And when it gets extensive, they will not remember that it's their daughter sitting with them. It's a total stranger. So it is a lack of ability to recall because the registered item isn't any longer there. The other thing that will help you, I think, Shauna, is to measure, does that impair you, in the analogy of, do you have to be carried over the fence? But if you are able to recover, today in preparation for this, I made notes. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have made notes. Well, I don't need notes. What do I need notes for? But it's not that I don't know what is on the paper. It's not that I am unable to understand what the topic is that we're talking about. So it is when the memory loss is new, when it's progressive, and when it's starting to impair you. It's crucial, though, not to shy away, though, because let's say, despite my reassurance for you today, you still worry about the fact that you couldn't get that car's name. Face the monster under the bed. See what size the monster is. Probably just a dust bunny. Probably not a big old bugaboo under the bed. So go and get a test. Go and talk to your doctor. At Okanagan Clinical Trials, since 2015, we've been doing free memory tests. People make an appointment, they get their test, they get their results that same day. If you go and you do a Montreal Cognitive Assessment, both those tests are out of 30, and you get a score of 29, you could be totally reassured that everything is fine. And now you have a foundational measure. So if you think, this is progressing, a year later you go and do that test again and it's still 29. And now you can say to yourself, I think it's okay.
Oh, that's really good to know.
I think the fear of it, and then not, because it had such a terrible reputation as the illness.
The stigma is...
Right.
Yeah.
That people tended to not go and get it checked out. And really, I hope that at the end of our conversation, one of the things that listeners will take home is do it earlier rather than later. We'll get back to that.
Okay. That's really good advice. I didn't know that was available. I'm going to take you up on that for sure. Part of it is too, I think that, I don't know, I'm going off script here, and I told you I was going to do that. But here we go. But the world that we live in today is so much more noisy and complicated than it was, like, say, for my grandparents' era, or even my parents, at 52 and at 65, you're still working, I'm working. I also am kind of still quasi-parenting my children. I'm looking after my house. I am also, there's this thing called an iPhone that has just like completely also yanked every last bit of attention I might have into a whole other world that exists. And I just wonder sometimes if that also is contributing to this like system overload in the brain where I need help getting over the fence. I can do it myself because I'm carrying a lot of stuff.
That's true.
Is that a thing?
It's a beautiful analogy.
Okay.
I think that's true. There's several ways to answer you about that. About the cell phone and laptop and the information Amazon stream that we have exposed to. One of the complications, I think, is that we don't store data in our brains anymore.
Right.
So you just check it out. What's the tallest mountain in Africa? Kilimanjaro. What's the second tallest one? I don't know. Oh, Mount Kenya. But now I don't retain Mount Kenya as the second tallest mountain in Africa. It's available to me there. So we're training ourselves also not to remember, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, as we are more stressed, and I think that's factual, that every generation stresses more than the generation before. The Gen Zers, talking about real estate, the horrible difficulties that they have, the unfairness of being in that position, they've not made that to happen to them. All of those things are things that causes inflammation to start happening, oxidative stress to happening, and then that does play a role on the speed and the onset of neurodegenerative disorder.
I thank you for clarifying that. I was reflecting when you're talking about our ability to store data. The other day, somebody asked me for my sister-in-law's phone number. And let me tell you, I talk to her almost every day. I don't know her phone number. Like, I don't know her phone number. Also couldn't tell you, like, how to get to Quails Gate Winery, which I've been to many, many times without my GPS.
Yeah.
So there were certain things that we had to train our brains to do in decades past that we're not training our brains to do anymore. But similarly, there are things that we've trained our brains to do in this day and age, as in sort through multiple signals at the same time to figure out which one's the priority, which
ones are factual,
which ones are factual, which one's a priority, what's noise, what's not, that maybe our grandparents didn't have to sort through. So it's very interesting how the brain, your field must just be having a heyday right now. Cause like,
I don't think there's a shortage of work opportunities.
You know, it's so funny that you say that because both my kids are looking for jobs right now. You talk about sort of the stress that young people are going through. It's not as easy to get a job these days either. And so I was just looking like jobs in Kelowna. There are so many job openings for psychiatrists or people that are working in mental health.
Wow.
It's anyway.
So just a little feedback. I have never had a cell phone in my life. But
really?
When I started working for OCT, I had to have a cell phone in terms of security if you sign onto your system and so forth.
Oh, yes.
So, but that's all that thing does.
That's all you do with it?
And I can give you the telephone number of OCT. It's 1250-862-8141. Right? If my wife needs to phone me, I need to tell her what the number is.
Wow.
So it's really, I don't want to be this dooms prophet and saying stay away from technology, but I think technology should be taken in pre-planned bits. It's very difficult to avoid the way that we are technologically connected and plugged in, but I actually think it's really not good for our brain.
Yeah, and
we
we've
need to
heard
sit
that.
And look at the sunset. Enjoy teaching your little grandkid to drive a bike. To do things.
Yeah. You've mentioned. I want to ask you. about, you mentioned inflammation and oxidization in the brain. So we've sort of talked about the environmental impacts that can cause some of the the muscle in the brain to start to wane. But then there are also things that are happening physiologically in the brain, oxidization and inflammation, that would accelerate perhaps the symptoms around this.
So, Shauna, are you asking me to talk about the pathophysiology of the? Okay.
Yeah.
This is part of the problem, that we didn't understand it so well, but there is such a wealth of information coming in now. The whole process of Alzheimer's dementia, by example, is a cascade. So what happens is that you have a thing called amyloid beta. It's a protein that gets manufactured in the brain naturally. So we tend to think amyloid beta is terrible. The problem with amyloid beta is it's too much. So there's tiny amounts in the healthy brain, and it works with synaptic regulation, and it works with helping neurotransmitters do their job, and it even in some cases fight infection. But when the production versus clearance gets to be problematic, and it starts, there's less cleared than there's made, then this starts clumping outside of the cell. It's also actually in soluble form and toxic there as well, which then inflames and hyperactivates the neurons, and then they start messing up the immune system. There's microglia and astrocytes around the neurons, that sort of the caretakers and garbage collectors. So they get activated, they stop doing their job. Then the tau protein, which is the best way to think about tau proteins is that they like the hydro towers that holds up the electrical circuit. So they're keeping that system going. Then they start sagging down and clumping together, and you get neurofibrillary tangles, and then you get further oxidative stress, and then something called necroptosis happens, where the cell just gives up and die. And it happens, unfortunately, in the synaptic areas of the brain most often, and it happens in the limbic and hippocampal areas, which is the memory areas. They are the most vulnerable in terms of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is not as tight in those areas, which is where they then get to fall down first. And then also what happens is that as soon as tau starts proliferating, it's almost as if it's contagious. A cell that's been fine next door to the cell that's falling down gets this tau acceleration happening as well.
Okay.
And all of that is inflammatory as well. So, and the inflammatory is both ways. We may speak about that more, but when we talk about that gut brain, the immune brain, and the cardiovascular brain connections, it is all having a basic inflammatory response. And this is something we had no idea about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all the processes preventatively that we can do that decreases a stress response has fantastic benefits years down the line.
It's fascinating what we're starting to learn, and as you said, in the last decade, and even in the last few years, it's fascinating what we're starting to learn about these neurodegenerative diseases. And I think it's really promising because as we said, there's so much stigma attached to this, but if we can understand it, then we can learn how to treat it, which is part of what you're doing. I'm going to ask you, we talk about dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and often they're used sort of like
interchangeably.
Yeah, but they're not, right? Alzheimer's is a subset of dementia.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. So all Alzheimer's are dementias, but not all dementias are Alzheimer's. And you quoted that number, 60 to 70% on average of dementias are Alzheimer's. So it's by far the predominant type. But then you get a good size of vascular dementias, of dementia with Lewy bodies and frontotemporal dementia that makes up a large part of the rest, and then very rare ones, Brian disease, Parkinson's, associated and so forth. And something interesting, talking about the research, I think it was 2019 when we discovered yet another type called, I think it's called late, not last. Vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontotemporal dementia. But we've been speaking about new discoveries in the last 5 years. I think there is a dementia that they've now discovered with the acronym LATE. It is limbic age-related TDP43 protein encephalopathy. And it happens from about age 80 onwards. After 80, 25% of dementias are that. It has a different outcome than Alzheimer's. It's more amnestic, so it is in the limbic area, the memory areas, and its progression is not as severe, it looks like. But there are other dementias happening. Complication of research is that how to find Alzheimer that's pure Alzheimer's. Right. Because the older you get, the more the other causes of dementia are starting to happen as well. So it becomes difficult to isolate a specific Alzheimer cases.
Yes, and I understand that in the context of when I had breast cancer. Before you have breast cancer, you think like all breast cancers are kind of the same. Yeah. But actually, there are some varietals that are more common than others. And then there are also, as you said, sort of like these even more specialized cases, slightly different pathology that characterize. So it's quite, as you say, although it's most common, like there's sort of like a glut of pathology that sits in this Alzheimer's category. There are certain kind of like distinctions. We're probably going to discover that there's even more.
I think so too.
Yeah, distinction between different kinds.
I think the breast cancer oncology is a fantastic example. They've gone before us, and really state-of-the-art work, as you know, is patient-specific.
Absolutely.
And so I think I am dreaming of the day. I think we're entering the era where we may eventually know enough with the biomarkers that are being developed, knowing exactly what it is we're dealing in this particular patient, and therefore the treatment is specifically tailored to that patient.
That is so exciting. So I want to pull back. We've talked about a little bit about the bigger picture, and even sort of here in Kelowna, the distinction that we carry here. We're hearing that dementia rates are rising in Canada. What's driving that?
Shauna, this is exciting to me because if you look at the raw data, it looks very startling.
Yeah.
There's not good statistical data. We have that 770,000, but there's not a lot of epidemiological studies going on in Canada, also because it's very difficult to do and very costly. But if we look at just the rise of the absolute numbers, globally, in 1990, there were 18 million people with dementia. In 2021, there were 51 million, and in 20 years, there will be 191 million dementia cases.
Okay, so like why?
That and the good news is that it's explainable actually.
Okay.
2046 it will be 5% of the world's population, the projected population. So 1 in 20 people.
Yeah.
And that sounds terrifying. But the biggest thing is because the global population and Canada's population and Kelowna's population and Okanagan's population is aging.
Yeah.
And so if you look at people above 65 and you look at 50 years ago, 8% of people in Canada were above 65.
Oh, okay.
Only 8%. In 2000, that number was 13%.
Okay.
And now it's very close to 20%. So if you look at that, you also see, wait a second, but the population is aging, so therefore the absolute numbers would rise. And then the other thing that one has to remember is that people with Alzheimer dementia also lives longer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they're getting better care. We had symptomatic treatments. We understand the illness better. The holistic management of the patient helps to make them survive longer. And so therefore you have the last part of it. The older you get, the more likely you are to get Alzheimer's. So we have this rising population, but for every 10 years after 65 years, the risk of Alzheimer's dementia quadruples.
I don't like that.
No, but it is in a sense it's a static number. There's some
like it's not going up.
No,
it's just a fact of getting older.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
okay.
there's some if you do age adjusted studies.
Yeah.
Again, expensive to do, but there's a study in Ontario that actually showed when they looked at I think it was the 75-year group, there was actually a 16% reduction in the numbers. It's this aging population that is confounding us and making us frightened.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, a massive challenge for healthcare.
Yes.
Massive challenge. So that is very important for the healthcare authorities to take good notice of, and I'm sure that they do. And then also fantastic opportunity, because if we invest preventatively, we are going to make even a better dent in taking the relative risk numbers down.
Okay. You said my favorite word, which is preventatively and prevention. So I'm going to ask you that, but I'm going to park that for a sec. I just want to circle back and underscore. So the challenge that we have in a place like Kelowna is kind of twofold. So just in general, the population is aging. Which we kind of already know. We're talking about this a lot in healthcare right now. It's having a big impact. But when people get to a certain age, they tend to move to Kelowna.
That's exactly the problem.
Yes.
So they move. I'm smashing this
me too.
microphone.
I always do that. It just means we're very happy and excited.
That's exactly true. So it was this good point that you brought up that made me so excited. So the Kelowna is a fantastic retirement place. So people save up their life savings and they come here. The complications, they often don't bring their family with.
Yes.
So there may be one child that happens to be around, but most often they move in isolation of their family structure.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're sitting here with a community that has lesser support than urban Vancouver.
Right.
And then, by the way, we're also spread out.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
So I have the fantastic luck that I'm renting downtown. So everything is close by. But if I'm in Lake Country, then it takes 45 minutes to get anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so here we have a couple where eventually one of the two cannot drive. Mm-hmm. And so there's that isolation that happens as well. So I think biologically, Alzheimer's is Alzheimer's everywhere. But I think Kelowna and the Okanagan particularly are having a tougher time than I would think almost anywhere else, because it's such a retirement area.
Yeah. And also the size of the region as well. Like, we're just talking about Kelowna, but like KGH, for example, or even this sort of like clinical center here in the central Okanagan is the referral center for a very huge region, right? All the way from sort of like Golden to Osoyoos down in the south. So then you have that complication as well, which if somebody is struggling and they don't have a family support network and they're 2 hours from sort of like the main referral center, those are all sort of things that are real barriers to people getting help. I want to talk about that, and that has a direct implication for the clinical trials being based here, right? It's very, very important. I want to talk about the science and the shift in the field, because as you've mentioned, the last 10 years, there has been some movement. And it feels like we've kind of gotten to maybe, like, when it comes to options, right? I mentioned options. We're sort of getting to a turning point. Do you feel like that is the case?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We are the first disease-modifying product, lecanemab, came into our country, approved for Alzheimer's dementia in October of last year. There's another one, donanemab, but Health Canada hasn't yet given us approval for that. It is available in the state, and they are amyloid modifying agents. So what they are is they are monoclonal antibodies that gets transported into the cerebrospinal fluid, and then at a cellular level, they decrease the amyloid clumps, they decrease the plaques. In the 18 months of that particular study, and I'm very proud to say, by the way, 16 people of the Okanagan were able to experience that medication as a result of the trials. Yeah. 16 is way too little, but 16 is a lot if you think about...
If you're those 16 people.
Exactly. And so during the 18 months, there was a 72% reduction in the amyloid numbers.
Wow.
And if you look at it slightly differently also, because trials are placebo run as well, there's always a placebo arm. So they could look at the placebo arm by the time of unblinding and saw that during that 18 months, the lecanemab patients progressed 4 to 5 months slower than the placebo.
So their disease progressed slower.
4 to 5 months over 18 months.
Wow.
Which is astounding. Dilemma with this breakthrough is that it is laborious. You have to have an intravenous infusion. There's safety issues at the moment. Something called ARIA happens. So that's amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. So you can get ARIA-E, which there's some swelling of the brain that can happen. You can get microhemorrhages, ARIA-H, usually asymptomatic, but 3 to 6% of people can have vision disturbances, confusion, headaches. Usually resolves, but it could result in death. So therefore you, very rarely, but therefore you have to have follow-up MRI scans if you continue on it, and you have to have close medical supervision. Very expensive at the moment still, so it'll be a question of scaling, but it is there, and it hadn't been there before. There are tons of studies in the pipeline being busy. I think at last count we had close to 20. We have close to 20 at OCT that we're running at the moment.
Wow.
And the beauty is now they're looking at, can we change the intravenous infusion to subcutaneous injection?
Right.
Can we do orals? There are work on gene expression that's happening. There's work that's happening on combination therapy of both amyloid and tau. So and they're all happening at the moment. I think in 2024, there were 182 trials worldwide on Alzheimer's dementia, and it's just exploding.
Wow.
We all are scared of having this disorder, and I think that's part of the drive that we want to see, can we beat this enemy?
Yeah, and I think it's great that I say it's great. It's not great that everybody's getting old. Do you know what I mean? But that the demographic.
No, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Because
it drives it.
Yes, and to a certain degree, there's an incentive there.
Yes, absolutely.
To really get to work on these treatments.
And you know, Shauna, I am not somebody who believes in generational gaps. I think we are all the same people. And anybody at a younger generation that's upset with me, come and chat with me, because I would just love on you till you like me. And so, I want to include our younger generations. In fact, this drive is really good news for them.
Yes.
Because actually, the time I believe to take care of it is when you are 35 and you go for a test and you see that your ApoE4 positive, or you see that you have a p-tau 171, a little blood test that we can do at any lab today in this province. And then you say, let me do the prevention so that I don't get it. Sometimes one of the complications of clinical trials is that the later stages of the disease is problematic because, again, there's multiple pathology, but once that tau plaques are there, at the moment it doesn't look like it's completely reversible.
Okay.
But if you can prevent those plaques and fibrils from taking place, you can avoid the illness altogether.
Okay, I'm going to go there. So what are the things that you're learning about? Like, what is an optimal time? I'm going off script here. But
Okay.
You mentioned sort of at 35 or 40, like once the plaques are there and the tau
Mm-hmm.
starts to sag,
Mm-hmm.
the saggy tower, right? You have the disease and it will eventually progress. We're working on ways to slow that progression. But are you saying that there are things that we can be doing proactively or preventatively to avoid those things?
For sure. Shauna, and it's interesting, there's a debate going on in the dementia field at the moment. There's a group that says, no, you only have Alzheimer's dementia by the time you have the cognitive impairment. And there's a growing body consensus saying, no, you actually have the disorder by the time your biomarkers starting to be positive.
Okay.
It just doesn't mean that it will progress fully to cognitive impairment. But it is Alzheimer's dementia. And I think that's a huge watershed shift. I think if we are eventually going to be in general consensus that it is in fact the disorder that's there at 35, then the whole prevention thing will explode. There are already preventative trials in place as well. Mm-hmm. They're looking at diet, they're looking at that kind of a thing. So prevention, let me just take a quick step back. At the moment, the bio changes happening up to 20-25 years before the cognitive impairment.
Okay. Wow.
So before you notice that your memory is starting, it's a silent time. But what an opportunity. It's also a challenge, but what an opportunity if we can identify those people, if they look under the bed and see it isn't a dust bunny, it is a bit of a nasty creature that's going to grow.
It's little, but it's there.
It's growing. It's going to be there. Then similar again to cancer.
Yes, totally.
Very, very much the same. Then there's so much that you can do. Move.
Okay.
Move. If you move 150 minutes a week, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
I walk from my rented apartment to OCT. It's a lovely 10-minute walk. That's 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Right. If you move, you protect. Exercise creates or actually stimulates something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that directly protects from apoptosis and necroptosis. It in fact stimulates stem cells to generate new copies and is synaptogenic. It's a physical thing that movement does.
Yeah.
Make sure that you sleep appropriately. Take care of your stresses. Connect with people. Be curious. And food is crucial. It's so interesting. When I was a young medical doctor, the medicine field poo-pooed dietary interventions, vitamins. It's sort of lots of mansplaining. Now, what you guys know, you're silly, you dietitians, you. And we were so wrong. If you look at phenols, so the bright-colored fruit and vegetables, for instance, if you look at 3-omega fatty acid, if you look at fiber, those things are, and this will move us into the gut-brain connection after this, I know. That is so good for our biome. On the other hand, if we have a diet rich in sugar or saturated fat or processed food, that creates dysbiome. And those two populations of gut bacteria directly plays a role in the pathogenesis of the illness. There's even some evidence that some of those bad bacteria makes amyloid themselves, and they seed it up the brain. So really, there's a lot of preventative stuff. Head injuries. Get your kids to wear helmets when they wear a bike.
Right.
Don't take up boxing as a sport. Rugby is our national sport, and I love it. But goodness sakes, what we are doing to people, alcohol use, all the commonsensical stuff, very powerful. If you do 2 to 3 of these things, not everything all at once, because it's overwhelming for people to do that.
Yeah.
Research shows that it decreases the chances by 65%.
Wow. So just getting enough sleep, going for a walk every day, and
connecting with people,
eating fruits and vegetables.
Yeah,
connecting with people.
Those 4 things already will bring you down 65%.
Wow.
65% of the people will not develop it that would have developed it.
Yeah.
So they have that quiet disease, but it's just not expressing into it in there.
So even if you're somebody who is, let's say, between the ages of 35 and 50, like myself, okay, 55.
50.
Let's
increase
the range.
You're still on the right mathematical side.
Yeah. So even just adapting our lifestyle a little bit to include those 4 things, even if, let's say, the dust bunny is there, it will slow the progression
and might not ever become the symptomatic illness, or might only start at 88 instead of at 75.
Yes. Well, that is really good advice.
Good news.
Very good news.
It's good news.
I'm doing all those things, although I do have a glass of wine occasionally.
No, but that's not it. It's not that you cannot have wine. There's a study out, the commission, I think it was 2020 that came out, that says best is no alcohol. But that's just because statistically, the guy that has 1 glass of wine a month statistically has a higher chance to over a lifespan land in an accident than the guy who doesn't.
Right.
So mild social use occasionally, seriously, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Quail's Gate needs their business.
I need Quail's Gate.
Yes.
They have great muscles, not just wine. Nice
to know.
I know there's so many things I still want to ask you. You mentioned there's all sorts of things that impact, that are like woven into this, right? One of the things that you just mentioned was the gut-brain connection. This is something that we've been hearing a lot about in relation to a number of different diseases. You also mentioned exercise, and now shifting sort of to those who are already living with the disease, or even just in general. What is the relationship between the gut and the brain that we're starting to learn about the potential benefits of this connection?
It's interesting. Sometimes facts are right in front of you and then you don't know it. I'll just jump the rails quickly for a second. ADHD, for instance, was used to be seen as an childhood and adolescent disorder. And then one day I thought, okay, so when Canadians turn 19, they stop having it, but the Americans only stop having it at 21, because that's when they turn adults, and that's just ridiculous. And then as soon as you looked at that, it's staring you in the face. No, it just doesn't stop on the day of majority. It is a disorder that doesn't happen as frequently when you're an adult, because you do mature out of it sometimes, but it's there. And I think similarly, the gut and the brain had been staring us in the face from the days we were first embryos.
Yeah.
On an embryonal level, those two organ systems are the last two to divide away from each other.
Oh.
They're the last two, which is why so many of the gut receptors are also in the brain, and which is why if you give somebody an antidepressant, they often have nausea or some GIT response, because it's the same receptors that it's targeted in the brain.
Wow.
It's been there all along. But again, I think perhaps out of a sort of a nihilism, researchers just or teachers just didn't want to look at that, because the idea that food could be important somehow was just strange for people, I think, and I don't understand that. But if you look at the gut-brain connection, it is actually a two-way street. The longest nerve in the body, the vagus nerve, innervates the whole gut. And the microbiome that we have, when we say microbiome, we have trillions of bacteria living inside our intestines. They've lived with us since we were man. And so from the industrial times, we started really messing these poor guys up. They've been so beautifully, commensally living with us in such great symbiosis, and we just messed them up. And so what happens is, as we start messing it up, the healthy biome that gives us short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and those types of acids are very, very healthy for neurological protection. It works with synaptic plasticity, etc. And then when these other dudes starts getting into the neighborhood and they starting to take over from our good guys, they create something called lipopolysaccharides. And these things causes what's called leaky gut. Mm-hmm. So they penetrate through the intestinal walls, and they are actually toxic. They're toxic things that then goes to the brain and starts the processes such as there's a thing called the amyloid precursor protein, and these things are thought to play a role in that it cuts itself in the incorrect pieces that then starts happening to become an amyloid plaque. So it is a profoundly important one, and I think as we now know this and the research blossoms in this, I think there will be very amazing breakthroughs at probiotic therapy that again is tailored to get that biome to the biome it was supposed to be, to get the good guys back in the neighborhood.
Well, even just having, I mean, I love this stuff. The ability to or accessibility, let's call it, of the testing to figure out what's going on with your gut microbiome is still tricky. It's not, again, we're still figuring some things out as a health system.
That's the very incentive as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we now know, hey, it is very important for us to find those answers.
Yes.
So funding will come in to that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Jason's already giving me the rat. Can you believe it's already been like an hour?
Really?
I can't. I am not going to let you leave because as I've mentioned several times, the clinical trials that are taking place here in the Central Okanagan at, what's it called? OCT?
OCT or Okanagan Clinical Trials.
Okanagan Clinical Trials.
It's been a part of the neighborhood. It's been around since 1992.
Okay.
It started doing the memory test since 2015, so there's been thousands of people that's been helped. And in 2019, it was taken over or acquired by, taken over sounds hostile, acquired by Headlands.
The hostile takeover.
Hostile, it wasn't at all. And I have to immediately then speak about that. In 2019, they took over. They're a multinational clinical trial site organization. They currently have 23 sites in North America, incredibly collegial, fantastically supportive. It's part of the joy for me working because of what we have with them. And so they are very enthusiastic. They are invested in expanding this center into a center of excellence. They also like the fact that it isn't an urban center, so that it's not a homogenous group that all the urban people
they have their characteristics. They
deeply believe in inclusiveness and heterogeneity in research as well. So really very, very exciting. We're not going anywhere. We invite people. There's not only Alzheimer trials that's happening. There's major depressive trials. There's a lot of general medical health happening, stress incontinence, menopausal migraines, overweight studies, vaccination studies, COPD studies.
Wow.
There's a lot going on. I have a fantastic team. I've got a general physician, Dr. Mallory Meyer, that is a fellow principal investigator. I've got a fantastic nurse practitioner, Julia Walker. I'm name dropping.
Good, you should. Yeah.
They are fantastic. My team is just the most gorgeous young people you can meet. I learn, and I'm going to mangle it, that if you throw the tea down or you thrash the tea or something, that means that you're gossiping. I'm not exactly sure what that. Spill the tea.
If you thrash the tea.
If you spill the tea, you see, I'm still learning. A fantastic group of people that makes for a beautiful community. And if I see the caliber of the residents, that doesn't only come from Kelowna, that does come from Armstrong, and that does come from Salmon Arm.
Yes.
And the joy they have to be there. I really think that we are in the dawn of making Kelowna and the Okanagan a place of global relevance in terms of these studies.
That is so exciting.
Yeah.
What gets you out of bed in the morning to go to work and do your trials? What are you working on right now?
I always have something on the go.
I know.
Right?
You probably have a few, but what's kind of the exciting stuff for you?
I love being a grandpa. I've got two little grandkids, and they are the very best kids the world has ever seen.
Of course
I'm not
they are.
biased.
No.
I'm not biased. They're just wonderful little 6-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. So my wife and I do a lot of that. I still am very much involved in my clinical practice. I've been in that practice for over 30 years. Some of these patients I've seen for over 30 years. So there's very long relationships. I'm having to cut my numbers down because I've had this doubling up of my career. I write. I'm involved in Sparkling Hill in wellness programs there. All sorts of fun things. I should just do more yoga. That's something I'm
It sounds like you have a wide variety of things to keep you occupied, though. And from what I understand, that is actually very good for your overall brain health.
Yeah, Shona, I don't think that retirement, I think it's a construct.
Yeah. I
think one should understand, again, you can't quite get over the fence as fast as you were 25. So some jobs you just can't do as well. But I think people should continue to work and make a difference in the world. I think there should be purpose.
Yeah.
There should be something to get up in the morning for. And you know what? I knew that you were going to ask me the question about what makes me wealthy.
I am. Look at that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
I usurped the stage.
I know. I'm so predictable.
Yeah. and I really think that it is relationships that is my abundance. I've spoken about this fantastic team that I have. I have my patients that I feel that I have relationships with, my family, my friends, and an exciting new community. I have to say this: we find Kelowna, generally speaking, to be extremely friendly, way more friendly than the lower mainland. And I am not shading my dear people there. I think I think they're more frightened to open their hearts to you. It takes a longer time to do that. So relationships is my big thing. I have the aptitude of being hopeful and optimistic. I think I said to my wife, one song that has to be played at my funeral one day is The Killers, Everything Will Be All Right. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right, Shona. Yeah. We are making such headway with this disorder. And then the final thing is the habit of gratitude. I know that I have such a privileged life. And every day is surrounded by events of gratitude. For you to invite me here, to meet all of you, a whole new community that I now know, to be able to sit with the equipment we sit here, with the lighting, sound producers and engineers going to make it into a hopefully fine podcast, the sunshine, the water, the food. And then I want to end up with that. I think that in terms of the wealthy question, I think that no matter what happens, and we spoke about this before, no matter what happens, there's always something good that'll come out of that if you are just willing to look and find it. And when you look at that, how can you not be wealthy? Right?
Well, I mean, you've wrapped it up so perfectly. I have so many questions that I didn't get to, but I think that this conversation feels complete to me. But I do invite our community, our audience, if there are things that I didn't get to ask Dr. Pieter that you want to know, please make comments, reach out to us. I'm sure I could convince him to come back.
I'd love to come back. Thank you so much.
If there's one thing that you could leave our audience with, I suspect that there are people that are listening to this conversation, extremely closely, because this maybe affects them or someone they love. What would you what are your last words?
Shauna, if you think about the loss that people have and the lack of agency that they've had, we all have had, I think we have agency now. I think we are not powerless anymore. I think, therefore, diagnosis and treatment begin when you reach out and say, is something not okay with me? And that you have then bought yourself time to start doing preventative measures. And I think any person who steps up to say, I'd like to be part of a clinical trial, in my eyes already is a hero. Because they do it fully knowing well that they might just get a placebo. They might not even get the product. But they do it also for the good of all mankind. And I think that we need to know that we have burgeoning instruments that are tools in our battle against this. The science today is more hopeful than ever, and the ability to act on it is more real than ever before. And I think my young team will probably, if they stay in the research career, will see at the culmination of their career that we can actually prevent this illness from occurring. I think this is a disease that we can cure. And I want to leave us all with that hope and that excitement.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pieter Strauss. It has been a pleasure to have you in that seat. You have served your community of psychiatrists and clinical researchers, your team at OCT and the Headlands, group very well.
Thank you.
And we're just, I literally can't wait to have you back, because I feel like there's so much more that you have to share. And you do it in such an eloquent way, with lots of stories that really help us understand something that in a lot of cases isn't really understandable for most of us. So thank you for coming.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me.